I'm going to make an arrow quiver from this raccoon skin. This video is part 1 where I'll show you how to preserve a large fur like this, and this method can be used for the skin of any mammal. In the next part, we'll take that preserved rawhide fur and turn it into an arrow quiver.
Sometimes you gotta be opportunistic. That is probably the biggest raccoon I've ever seen in my life. I weighed this raccoon earlier. He's 28 pounds. Now you can simply tie a loop in some rope, then feed that loop through itself to make a noose, and slip that over the ankle of any animal. That way you can hang them up to skin them. Much more weight than that, and that branch will snap. I've seen coyotes smaller than this raccoon. To manage this skinning, we're using my own brand knife, the SageSmokeSurvival Bushcraft Knife. I had it designed to be a really great skinner. Black walnut handles, 1084 high carbon steel. It holds a good edge, and it's easy to sharpen, which is key for me. I don't like super steels because they're so hard to sharpen. Now, just taking a stick like this, you can see just propping his legs apart. All right, just like skinning a rabbit or any other animal, you're gonna ring around the ankles, cut down to the crotch, then you can case skin him, but I don't think I can put that sort of pressure on this branch. His ankles are nice and meaty, which is good. I have lots of buffer to avoid hitting bone. I'm gonna render the fat from this guy. Now, raccoon fat is useful for all sorts of stuff. I won't use it for cooking because this guy was roadkill and I don't know exactly how old he is. It's been cold. He could be a few days old without showing any signs of rot. I'll stick with the safest stuff in general for cooking, but stuff like oiling my bow, other woodwork, leather grease, even burning as fuel. It's perfect for that. This guy's got thick skin. You don't want to hit bone. That dulls your knife. There we go, around both ankles. Now, carefully insert the tip of the knife, start cutting towards the crotch. Favor the front side of the crotch. If you favor the back side, you might hit glands they have at the base of their tail, and it'll be a little stinky if you hit that. On this side, you don't need to insert it in if you can't. Just get the tip in, work your way down. You just don't want to cut through all that fur. You want to leave the fur uncut as possible because it makes a mess and gets all over everything. See little bits of the undercoat start floating everywhere once you cut it. So I'm trying just to cut skin and not fur. Instead, just parting through the fur. Join the cut in between. Oh, yep, that's a boar. You got the Arkansas toothpick in there. We'll save that. It should be a big one with a boar of this size. With that cut completed, we'll come around back here. We'll carefully cut around where the glands might be and around the anus. And then go up the tail just a ways. Then we'll start peeling everything down, and then we'll peel out the tail. You got to be really careful around the tail. It's easy to rip the skin off and not be able to save that tail. So I just made a V cut from the upper area around the anus to the tail, about right here. I'm gonna cut down this tail a little bit. All right, with that done, we'll start cutting around the legs, working that skin downwards. Very easy, just takes time. Pull the skin, and then you can see that where the connective tissue connects the skin to the meat. Just have your knife touch that, push into it just a little, and it easily peels stuff away without cutting through the skin or even putting nick marks on the skin. When you're tanning, you have nicks on the skin, they tend to open up. There's gonna be so much fat to scrape off this thing. Work it just like this. I'm not the quickest with big animals like this. I'm spoiled and I mostly skin rabbits, which are very easy to skin. But I've done a few coyotes with nothing but obsidian flakes. This feels similar. Work a little on one side, work the other side, get it all coming down even. You might be able to fully case skin this guy. Look at those fatty hams. I've seen some people cook up raccoon in ways that made me want a plate. I haven't tried it yet though. Once I trap one, I can make sure it's fresh as can be. Now we're reaching a special point. Right here, we can push through to connect the cuts on either side and get underneath that tail. We'll be able to insert a tool. I'll show you how to make the tool. I usually make it out in the field. And that tool will be able to pull that tail through. In really fatty areas, it's harder to tell when you're hitting meat versus when you're hitting skin. There we go. We have contact. You know what? I'd take it back. Skinning coyotes with obsidian blades was easier than this. Man, we even got a lot of fat in the tail. I'm learning so much about raccoons. Well, all you got to do is get a dead stick like this. If it has a crack in it already, great. You can use that to help with the splitting, because we're going to split this down the middle, and the two halves of the stick will sandwich the tailbone. It'll peel the bone right out of the skin. That didn't quite split center. That side's a little flimsy. I'm going to split this again. This still has enough meat left in it. That should do the trick right there. Here's how you do it. Let's see if we can get that tail skinned. Insert one half. The other half goes on top. Line it up. That ain't gonna work. That works with smaller animals. It works with coyotes. This thing has a gristly tail though. Well, instead, I'll cut the rest of the way down. We'll peel it by hand. I think that's the more viable method. I mean, this just has ridiculously thick skin, even on the tail. And I've handled a lot of animals, but raccoons are still pretty new to me. I've only handled 2 raccoon skins in my life, and they were both small. And this thing is just, this is a beast. Carefully separate all that skin away. Keep working down. All right, we're getting there. Maybe it'll work now. Nailed it. There's your tail. So now we'll go through with our knife and just split that out to the end. Good looking raccoon tail in the end is worth it. There's that Arkansas toothpick right there. Just gonna cut that at the base. This is called the baculum. It is a bone that serves a purpose that I probably cannot talk about on YouTube. Okay, we're just gonna keep working the skin down. Gets easier from here. Pull the skin, cut the membrane, light pressure, gravity will be on our side a bit. It's okay to leave meat on the hide. Don't try and skin it off. It'll be easier to remove during the fleshing process. Work it a little, rotate, work it a little, rotate. That's the pattern you follow all the way down to the armpits. And be very careful with the knife. I don't want this blood touching my blood. Yep, here's where he got hit by the car. In front of him run over. Might just need to open this hide up. Cut it off the front arms. Arms are just stiff from rigor mortis. All right, I hate it, but cutting the hide open along the belly. Try to minimize blood on the fur. This is gonna help me get it off the arms. It's a beautiful hide and it's worth saving. Most people don't see the value in a raccoon hide. Then you have primitive skills practitioners, tanners like me. Bit of a different breed. Going to these crazy lengths to save a roadkill raccoon hide. The hides themselves are worth very little in their raw state. Maybe $10 right now. And that might be generous. Out in the West, where I live, they're worth very little. They're better out in the East. You can't just buy raw hides unless you have a fur buyer's license. But I also just want to be able to procure hides myself, because that's a survival skill. Being able to trap animals and tan their hides and utilize them to the fullest extent, that is self-sufficiency. That is survival. Our ancestors have done this for a long time. I want to keep up that practice. There we go. One arm completely free. I'm gonna have to wash my hands before I even touch the camera again. There we go. Just imagine our ancestors doing this with bison and mammoths. The neck is the toughest part when tanning. Sinewy, tough material that the tanning solution doesn't like to penetrate through. I wish the mask was in good enough condition to save, but it's just not. They got some tough skin. This is a sharp knife. There we go. My goodness. That's a big hide. I did a quick rinse off. That knife handled all that like a champ. As always, it skinned many, many animals. Here's our beautiful raccoon fur. It's going to be so very useful. Somehow managed to get both the ears too. Maybe I can save that. Well, thank you, Mr. Raccoon. And as far as that raccoon baculum, the Arkansas toothpick, I'm leaving that out here. I'll come back to it in a few weeks once all the bugs and the microbes have worked all the meat off of that bone. And then I'll wash it in some hydrogen peroxide. It'll be pure white then, good to save. People used to make things from those, like fish hooks. Raccoon fur is just beautiful. I'm excited about this. I love those black-tipped guard hairs, the silky white guard hairs. On to cleaning this hide and preparing it for rawhide. All right, we'll get this raccoon all fleshed out here in my backyard. This fleshing beam is simply a log that I scraped the bark off of. You can see it's just freestanding, propped against the base of the house, and I made a simple X at about the right height. It gives me some adjustment. If I want the log to be a little higher, I can move it down. If I want it to be lower, I can move it up. The X is just a couple of 2x4s secured with a few screws, and I use this to flesh pretty much everything except for rabbit skins, which I flesh over my knee using a different tool. You can check out that video right here. We'll use a fleshing knife too. It's simply a two-handled piece of metal. This beveled side has a very slight curve to it. That just improves grip while reducing chances of it cutting through the hide, and it's dull. This single bevel is very dull. It's just meant to push fat and meat off the hide. To keep grease and general animal nastiness off of myself, I usually just take a garbage bag and use a bit of baling twine and tie it around my waist like this. It's a little makeshift apron. I do my work, and once I'm done, I can take this and just throw it away. There's that big, beautiful raccoon skin. This was a big boar. Might be really tough in some spots. We'll see what we can do here, though. Yep, I might actually need a special kind of fleshing knife with a sharp side and a dull side. I'm just working the side of the hide right now, and there's a lot that doesn't want to come off. All right then, we will be right back. Well, here's what they had. Fair bit sharper. I was hoping for one that had a dull side on the inside of the bend and a sharp side on the outside of the bend, but now they just had the one-sided. But this one's sharp, so that's okay. For some greasy animals, or animals with really tough flesh, a sharp fleshing knife can be the way to go. Holy cow. Yeah, that slices. I already put a hole in the dang thing. Thought I was being careful. Okay, changing the angle. I'm upset about those holes. That sucks. So with a steep angle like this, I'm not gonna cut the hide near so easily, but sometimes I need a light slicing motion at a low angle like this. It's just how greasy hides are, especially up here. It's real gristly at the back of the head, back of the neck. Doing light slicing motions for this tough stuff, and that's it. We'll switch to the dull knife for the rest. That's it, switching to the dull one. Now this one's just way too dull. Used to think I was pretty good at fleshing animals. We're just gonna dry this into rawhide. We'll make a quiver from it. We'll tan some better ones. Seemingly with all hides that I open up, I have the best luck fleshing them by scraping all the meat and fat from the spine off to the sides. Rather than going head to tail, I go from center to side. I think that's more in line with the fascial connections and muscle fibers. You want a distinct edge that's able to grip on to the meat and the fat. You just don't want it to be sharp. I think I just had it too sharp. Every animal's a little different, and clearly I had to relearn how to flesh a raccoon. It's okay, I got some raccoon traps set, so I'm going to get a lot of practice. No better teacher than that. All this area is fleshing really nicely. Getting down to clean skin. I frequently have to wipe all the fat off. It just gunks up the knife. Everything scrapes a lot better when you remove that fat that's built up. Next raccoon I get, I want to try rendering some of this fat. I can make raccoon fat soap. I'll flesh the tail more thoroughly in a bit. I want to get all the surrounding fat off the haunches. This knife now feels like it's at the perfect sharpness. You can hear it gripping the skin well, but it's not sharp enough that it's cutting anything. It's simply just pulling at the weak connection between the meat and the fat really efficiently. If I wanted to brain tan this raccoon, or any sort of fat tan, brain tanning is simply a form of fat tanning, but you can use egg yolks instead. You can use oil mixed with soap. It just uses emulsified oils. Those are oils that can mix with water to penetrate and lubricate the collagen fibers. See, the skin itself is made up of a lattice work of collagen fibers. So skin under a microscope looks a bit like felt or like fabric with these fibers weaving it together. When you're fat tanning, you use special kinds of oils that can mix with water and will lubricate all of those individual fibers. They then oxidize, bonding with the collagen and creating aldehydes, which create bridges between the collagen fibers. It's all highly scientific. But I say all that to note that once you're done fleshing, there's another layer of material that you still have to remove to get good penetration with your fat, and that layer is called the membrane. I really need to do some brain tanning videos. I'm working on one right now. I need to get it finished. And once I trap some raccoons, then we'll do some real bigger critter brain tanning. That's what I've been wanting to do for a while. Most people case skin raccoons and then flesh them that way. So what I'm doing is outside of the norm, at least for the industry. All right, I think we're mostly there. We'll have to degrease this hide, but gotten everything big off. Too bad about those holes I put in it. That is just some beautiful fur. Once we wash it up, it's gonna be even prettier. Nice prime January coat. Now with that, I'll get cleaned up, and the next part will be washing this and then stringing it in a frame and getting it to dry nice and flat. Now it may look clean, that's how furs always look, but they're absolutely filthy, and you'll see in a minute. I'm going to soap down the flesh side of this hide really good. The soap will get to the fur side too, and it'll get clean. But we'll soap this down, put it in a bucket, fill that bucket up with water, and stomp around in it for a while. The water's just gonna be filthy after one round of this. We'll dump that off, add some fresh water, keep on doing that till it rinses clear, until it doesn't feel very greasy anymore. 5-gallon bucket, some liquid Castile soap. This stuff from Dr. Bronner's is just cheap and biodegradable. That's why I use it. I know many people prefer Dawn dish soap. That works too. In a more primitive setting, you could probably just use wood ash. You just don't want it to soak on the hide for a long time. But if you put a layer of wood ash on this, rub it in, and then rinse it out, that's probably going to do a good job degreasing it. Wood ash left on for a while will most definitely swell the hide and make the fur start to slip out. That's a process used in making buckskin called bucking, hence the term buckskin. Be generous with the soap. Into the bucket. Leave a little room for you to stomp around. There we go. I just really want to be able to press down onto the hide, push that soap through all the fur. You might need a few rounds of soaping, but you can see just how filthy that water is. The fur will look so much better after drying it. Disgusting. It works though. Ew. Yeah, dump this somewhere where you don't want things to grow. That soap may be biodegradable, but I don't know what concentration of it the plants can withstand. No matter what fur you're working, it's a good idea to wash it. I'm actually gonna give it a more concentrated, less water, more soap. Just really want to cut that grease. There's only so much of it you can remove wet. And once we frame up this hide, it's going to dry, and the last of the grease in the skin is going to render out to the flesh side. And there it can be wiped off and even washed off. I'm gonna leave it there, probably overnight. It's getting pretty close to freezing tonight. I'm not worried about this rotting. I just wanna really make sure I'm removing as much grease from this hide as possible. Just makes my job easier later. Now to really get the soap out of this hide and fully neutralize it, and tying it to a piece of cord and chucking it out into the river to rinse. Better make sure your knot skills are good or else you'll lose the hide. Figure I'll save myself the water bill. All the soap's biodegradable. That tiny bit of soap isn't hurting the environment here. The nice thing about tanning hides in winter is it's just cold enough that there's never great risk of hair slippage. Now we need a frame for this thing, so I'm gonna cut a few straight branches around 4 feet long, maybe a little longer. Would have been much easier to bring my axe with me. I wanted to see how quick I could do it with just a knife though. You know, it's not very fun cutting big branches like that with just a knife, but sometimes a knife is all you have on you. And so I think it's always a good thing to practice. Sometimes convenience kills competence. Do things the hard way with minimal gear every now and then. That way you know how to do it. Once it's less saturated, we'll get it up in that frame. But let's put that together now. You could most certainly just use stuff from Home Depot to do this. I'm doing this whole video in a little bit more of a bushcraft way because I think people will appreciate that knowledge, and that's kind of what my channel is geared around. The hide minus the tail is about 3 feet long. When to notch things out really simply, you shouldn't need much instruction, but I'll give it anyway. I'm just going to cut notches out of the larger sticks in all of this frame. Here's a corner of the frame. I left this Y branch here because I figure that's going to offer some stability if I can tie it in 2 places. The problems with these frames is they often like to go diamond shaped on you or trapezoid shaped. So if you have reinforcing on the corners, then that minimizes that. Just putting a mark there, carve out sections for those to seat in. And I'll even do the forbidden task of batoning wood, because that makes cutting notches go so much faster. There we go. If you don't know, knife guys will scream at you for doing this with a knife because apparently it's supposed to be really incomprehensibly bad for them, but it makes quick notches. They've started developing a neighborhood right across the river. This place is getting way too urban. All right, now I'm going to lash together all those corners while you guys enjoy the sounds of nature. All right, so I'll set that there. Now that will enable me to just start stringing up the raccoon skin from the top so it can hang here, and then I can work hands-free to string up the rest of it. That way it's just not lying flat on the ground and getting all dirty. We just spend all that time getting the dirt out of the fur. Once the top is strung up, then we'll put a little tension on it, string up the bottom, then we'll pull out the sides, string those up, then we'll go around the entire thing and pull out all the slack that we can within reason. You don't want to pull it so tight that it's going to rip out when it dries, but just pull it so it's taut, and then it'll dry nice and flat, and after that it's ready for crafting unless it needs further degreasing. Here's our first hole. Just open that a little bit. There we go. Every couple inches. Now, I really like this Sisal twine for most of my hide stuff. I find with sheep hides it doesn't work too well, but anything smaller than that, it works great. Well, correction. It doesn't work so well for tanning a sheepskin while it's in the frame. So for that, you need something stronger. Now for this corner, all I'm gonna do is I looped through the hole. I'm gonna tie a bite. A bite is just a simple overhand knot that you leave a loop in. That way, you can pull one side to undo it. Hope that makes sense. All right, so there's our very corner. There we go, and continue on. If you can't feed your thread through because it's really frayed like this, twist it together until it kinks, then use that bend. That bend will push through those holes much easier. But this way you don't need a needle to string up a hide. Don't worry about getting it tight yet, you just need it hung. right, we'll tie that off for now, just with another bite, just like that. I purposely left some slack here just because I want to cut this part off. There we go. We string up the bottom pretty much the same way, except I'm gonna skip over parts of the tail and I'll just let that dry on its own, or I might tack it out flat against a board. In this case, I'm gonna tie my bite onto this corner instead. It's always fun once you get the bottom done and start doing the sides, because then it really takes shape. That's when I get excited about it. It just showcases the quality of the fur. Takes a lot to get it to that point though. As you can see, a lot goes into traditionally made fur products. Good things are worth working for. Here's where I skipped over the rest of the tail, just pretending the tail isn't there. Here's the end of my string. I can tie on another section. I just want to make sure that section's not going through too many holes, because it's a pain when you have to pull a knot through the holes. To tie on a new piece, do a simple square knot. Go under one way, then under the opposite way, to have these two intersecting loops. Just like that. Square knots pull themselves tighter. There we go. A bite right here. I like tying the corner off to the side here because it allows you to stretch the whole bottom. Same with the top. Everything gets progressively easier as you go with this. It's like you have more hands to do the work once everything's tied up. Now, really be generous with the holes that you cut. Let them be almost a ½ inch in. It's not worth saving that tiny bit of hide, because you're gonna rip out so much if you have it any closer. I learned this the hard way, and I ignored the people who gave me this advice. It's really just not worth saving that last little bit of hide. Give yourself lots of material for the rope to grab, just to make sure it doesn't rip out. Okay, that should be all the holes we need. Just gotta finish this last side now. Stringing up animal hides always takes a while, especially if you're building the frame. If you're tanning a hide, you have to take it down and restring it. That's not as big of a deal, because you have all the holes cut. You might even have all the string cut already. Last raccoon I did, I strung up in a hoop frame. It was just 2 pieces of willow bent into a circular shape. It was a very small raccoon. I could get away with it. I was living in an apartment at the time, unmarried. I had roommates though. So to wash that raccoon, I actually brought it to the shower with me, along with a bottle of Dawn dish soap. And I scrubbed the grease out of it the best I could while showering. At the time, the only other thing I could think to do was to throw it in the washing machine. Since we all shared, I figured that would get me in trouble. I'll have to go ahead now and tighten everything up. It's a good looking raccoon though. I'm glad I can save some of its pelt. To tighten everything up, we're going to chase the slack through each side. You don't have to make it crazy tight. Just pull the slack out, just like this. So it ends up about this tightness. You can see just how much slack has developed. And that's why we tied all of our knots as bites, so they're easy to pull out and redo. If you make a frame with 2x4s instead of branches from nature, like I did, you'll want to put nails in the 2x4s to loop the string over, rather than looping it over the entire 2x4, because they'll just slide around. You won't be able to get the hide to stretch how you want it. Just a pro tip from a guy who has, once again, learned the hard way and ignored people's advice. And that, of course, makes my advice the best he can take, right? All right, well then, all tightened up, even warping the frame a little. That's okay if the frame warps. The hide is tight. That's what matters. I'll put this in the back of my truck on the drive home. It's gonna get some wind on it. Hopefully that helps it dry a bit. If I really think it needs it, then I'll use a leaf blower and totally dry the fur. If the fur is holding water for too long, it's going to start to slip out. Bacterial growth in the follicles will cause the fur to come out in big patches. That's the last thing you want. So getting the fur dry as soon as possible is name of the game. Raccoon fur really is beautiful.